My name is Lindsay Thompson, and at 67 years old, I never thought my life would crumble so completely. After 40 years of marriage, my beloved wife Margaret passed away last spring. What should have been a time of shared grief became my personal nightmare when the will was read. Margaret left our daughter Amanda, our mansion, and $6 million, while I received nothing but a dilapidated cabin in the woods. The pain of betrayal cut deeper than my grief when Amanda stood in our family home, pointed to the door, and screamed, "Go live with the pigs!" Little did she know, that broken cabin would reveal a secret that would destroy everything she thought she had won. Before I tell you what I discovered in that cabin that turned my daughter's world upside down, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. I met Margaret during our sophomore year at Stanford University in 1975. I was studying engineering, and she was pursuing art history. We first crossed paths in the campus coffee shop, where I accidentally spilled my drink on her art portfolio. Instead of getting angry, she laughed and said it added character to her sketches. That moment of grace captivated me, and within 3 months, we were inseparable. Margaret was everything I wasn't. While I came from a blue-collar family in Michigan and worked construction jobs to pay tuition, she grew up in Connecticut surrounded by old money and culture. Despite our different backgrounds, we balanced each other perfectly. I taught her how to change a tire and appreciate simple pleasures. She introduced me to classical music and the nuances of fine wine. We married in 1977 in a modest ceremony at her parents' garden. They had hoped for something grander for their only daughter, but Margaret insisted on simplicity. "Love doesn't need fancy decorations," she told me the night before our wedding. I thought I knew then how lucky I was, but looking back, I had no idea how complex our journey would become. The early years were lean but happy. We rented a tiny apartment near San Francisco where I started working for a construction company while Margaret found a position at a small gallery. Weekends were spent hunting for treasures at flea markets to furnish our home, and taking long walks along the beach, dreaming about our future. We promised each other we would never let money change who we were at heart. In 1980, I took a risk and started my own construction business, focusing on custom homes. The timing was perfect as California's housing market began booming. Margaret supported me completely, even converting our dining room into an office for 6 months while I got the business off the ground. My company, Thompson Custom Homes, gained a reputation for quality craftsmanship and attention to detail. Within 5 years, we were financially comfortable for the first time in our lives. Our daughter Amanda arrived in 1982 after a difficult pregnancy. Margaret suffered from severe morning sickness and was bedridden for the final trimester. The moment the nurse placed Amanda in my arms, a protective love, unlike anything I'd ever experienced, washed over me. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I silently vowed to give her everything I never had growing up. As my business grew, Margaret's career took an unexpected turn. What started as a job at a local gallery evolved into a network of high-end art contacts. She had an uncanny eye for emerging artists and began brokering private sales between collectors. While I built houses, she built relationships with the art world's elite. At the time, I admired her business acumen without fully understanding the intricate web she was weaving. We moved into our dream home in 1990, a 5-bedroom Spanish-style house in an exclusive neighborhood with views of the bay. I remember Amanda, then 8 years old, running through each room squealing with delight, especially when she discovered her bedroom had a window seat overlooking the garden. Margaret decorated with a perfect blend of elegance and comfort, creating a showcase home that still felt livable. Family traditions became the foundation of our lives. Sunday dinners were sacred, with phones turned off and conversation flowing. Each summer, we took a 2-week road trip exploring national parks. Amanda's birthday always featured breakfast in bed and a scavenger hunt leading to her presence. Christmas Eve meant homemade pasta and exchanging one special gift before the main celebration. These rituals anchored us as a family, even as our work lives grew increasingly separate. In 1995, I purchased 3 acres of woodland near Lake Tahoe and spent weekends over 2 years building our family cabin by hand. It was nothing fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a great room with a stone fireplace, and a wide porch perfect for morning coffee. That cabin represented everything I valued, a place built with love where we could escape the pressures of our increasingly busy lives. Amanda helped me sand the floors and stain the cabinets, learning the satisfaction of creating something with her own hands. Margaret called it Lindsay's masterpiece, though she visited less frequently as the years passed, claiming allergies to the surrounding pine trees. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I missed about Amanda. Her sweet nature began shifting in her teenage years. When she was 16, she threw a tantrum because we bought her a Ford for her birthday instead of the BMW she wanted. Margaret soothed her with a promise to upgrade when she proved her responsibility, undermining our agreement to keep Amanda grounded. At the time, I chalked it up to normal teenage entitlement that she would outgrow. As Amanda entered college, studying business and art history at her mother's alma mater, Margaret began involving her in the art-dealing business during school breaks. They shared a passion I couldn't fully participate in, speaking a language of artists, periods, and valuation techniques that remained foreign to me despite Margaret's attempts to explain. I was proud of their bond but sometimes felt like an outsider in my own family. Still, I never imagined this distance would eventually become a chasm too wide to cross. The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday morning in January 2019. I was at a construction site when Margaret phoned, her voice unnaturally calm. The doctor found something. "Can you come to the hospital?" Those simple words initiated our descent into a nightmare of oncologist appointments, treatment plans, and eventually, hospice discussions. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, the disease had already spread to her liver. The prognosis was grim, 6 months at most. Margaret approached her diagnosis with the same composed grace she had shown throughout our marriage, but behind her brave face, I glimpsed moments of raw fear that broke my heart. "I'm not afraid of dying," she confessed one night. "I'm afraid of leaving you alone." I immediately stepped back from active management of my company, putting my trusted foreman in charge of day-to-day operations while I became Margaret's full-time caretaker. Our bedroom transformed into a medical space with a hospital bed, oxygen tanks, and medication schedules posted on the wall. I learned to administer injections, manage pain medications, and interpret the subtle changes in her condition that indicated good or bad days. Amanda's response to her mother's illness confused and hurt me. Despite living only 2 hours away in San Francisco, where she worked at a prestigious art gallery, her visits were infrequent and brief. She always had a reason, an important client meeting, a work deadline, or gallery events she couldn't miss. When she did visit, she spent most of the time closed in Margaret's room, the two of them speaking in hushed tones that fell silent whenever I entered. I told myself she was processing grief in her own way, and tried not to resent her absence when I was drowning in responsibilities. As Margaret's condition deteriorated, she became increasingly secretive. I would find her hurriedly ending phone calls when I entered the room, or closing her laptop with uncharacteristic quickness. Once, I discovered her and Amanda reviewing documents that were quickly shuffled away as I approached. When I questioned her, Margaret kissed my cheek and said, "Just tying up loose ends, darling. Nothing for you to worry about." 4 months into her illness, Margaret insisted on meeting with her attorney, James Wilson, without me present. She had always handled our financial matters, so while I found it odd, I didn't object. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours, and when Wilson left, he avoided eye contact with me, mumbling something about honoring client wishes when I asked about their discussion. That evening, Margaret seemed more at peace than she had in weeks, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. "I've made provisions for everyone," she said while we sat together watching the sunset from our bedroom window. "Promise me you won't question my decisions when I'm gone. They're made with love, Lindsay, even if they might not make sense to you right away." I promised, of course. How could I deny her anything when she was slipping away before my eyes? In that moment, all that mattered was easing her journey not questioning her methods. I believed completely in the woman I had loved for 4 decades, never imagining she might have built a life of secrets parallel to our shared one. The final weeks were a blur of morphine doses, hospice nurses, and sleepless nights. I slept beside her hospital bed in a recliner, holding her hand through the worst pain episodes, reading her favorite poetry when she was lucid enough to listen. Amanda visited more frequently as the end approached, but there remained a strange tension between us, as if we were competitors rather than family united in grief. Margaret died on a quiet Sunday morning in June. I had stepped out to shower, after the night nurse assured me Margaret was stable. When I returned 15 minutes later, she was gone, slipping away in that brief window when I wasn't holding her hand. The guilt of that moment still haunts me, the thought that she died alone while I was washing away the physical evidence of our ordeal. The days following her death passed in a haze of arrangements and paperwork. Amanda took control of the funeral planning with an efficiency that both relieved and disturbed me. The service she arranged was lavish and formal, filled with art-world figures I barely knew, and floral arrangements so elaborate they obscured the simple cherrywood casket I had selected. Margaret would have hated it, but when I suggested changes, Amanda dismissed my input. Mother discussed exactly what she wanted with me, she insisted. This is what she asked for. At the reception following the funeral, I noticed Amanda in deep conversation with James Wilson, Margaret's attorney. They stood apart from the other guests, their body language suggesting an intimate discussion rather than grieving client and legal counsel. When I approached, they separated immediately, Wilson making a hasty excuse about another appointment. The interaction left me uneasy, a feeling that intensified when Wilson called the next day to schedule the reading of the will, suggesting Amanda had already been informed of the details. "Is there something I should know before tomorrow?" I asked him directly. "Mr. Thompson, I can only say that Margaret had very specific instructions," Wilson replied, his voice professionally detached. "It would be inappropriate for me to discuss them before the official reading." That night, alone in the bed Margaret and I had shared for decades, I finally allowed myself to fully break down. The pillows still held the faint scent of her perfume, and I clutched them to my chest as sobs racked my body. The grief was overwhelming, but beneath it lurked something else, a growing sense that the foundation of my life had been built on shifting sand. Little did I know how prophetic that feeling would prove to be. The reading of the will took place in James Wilson's downtown office the following Tuesday. The space exuded old money with its leather chairs, oriental rugs, and walls lined with legal tomes that appeared more decorative than functional. Amanda arrived 15 minutes late, dressed in an expensive black suit that seemed more appropriate for a business merger than a family matter. She barely acknowledged me before taking a seat across the table, her posture rigid and her expression unreadable. Wilson cleared his throat and began the formal legal preamble in a monotone that suggested he had delivered these words countless times before. I struggled to focus, my mind still clouded by grief and lack of sleep. It wasn't until he reached the distribution of assets that his words penetrated my fog. "To my beloved daughter, Amanda Margaret Thompson, I leave our family home at 224 Laurel Avenue, along with all its contents except items specifically noted below. Additionally, I leave her my entire investment portfolio, art collection, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $6 million. The room seemed to tilt beneath me. Surely I had misheard. Wilson continued reading without pause. "To my husband, Lindsay Allen Thompson, I leave our cabin property at Lake Tahoe, including the structure and all contents therein." I waited for the rest, for the explanation of how our marital assets would be divided, for mention of the business I had built that had supported our family for decades. There was nothing else, just the cabin, a property worth perhaps $200,000 at most, with no mention of the millions in other assets we had accumulated together. "There must be some mistake," I interrupted, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "What about our joint accounts? The business? Our investments?" Wilson shifted uncomfortably in his seat before responding. "Mr. Thompson, I understand this is difficult to hear, but there is no mistake. Most of what you believed were joint assets were actually held in Margaret's name alone. The business was transferred to a trust controlled by Margaret several years ago, which now passes to Amanda. That's impossible, I protested. I founded that company. I ran it for 40 years. You signed the transfer documents yourself, Wilson replied, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were papers bearing my signature, documents I vaguely recalled signing during a period when Margaret had taken over managing our finances after I suffered a minor heart attack in 2010. Margaret included a personal letter explaining her decisions, Wilson added, handing me a sealed envelope. I tore it open with trembling fingers and read my wife's elegant handwriting through a blur of tears. "Dearest Lindsay," it began, "if you're reading this, I have left this world for the next. Please understand that my decisions regarding our estate are made with clear purpose. Throughout our years together, you have demonstrated that material wealth means little to you. Your happiness came from creation and simple pleasures, never from money or status. The cabin represents what you truly valued in life, a place built by your hands where you found genuine peace. Amanda, however, was raised in a world of privilege and requires financial security to thrive. I know this decision may hurt you initially, but in time, I believe you will understand it as an act of love, acknowledging the essence of who you truly are. All my love eternally, Margaret." I looked up from the letter to find Amanda watching me with cold calculation, no trace of empathy in her expression. "This is what Mother wanted," she stated flatly. "She knew what was best for both of us." "Amanda, this doesn't make sense," I pleaded. "This was our family, our life together. How can you accept this?" "Accept?" She laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "I've known about this arrangement for years. Mother and I planned carefully to ensure her wishes would be carried out legally." The betrayal crashed over me in waves. Not just my wife's secret decisions, but my daughter's willing participation in them. Years of planning, years of deception, while I believed we were a loving family. "I'll need you to vacate the house within 30 days, Amanda continued in a businesslike tone. "I've already spoken with a realtor about listing it, and your continued presence would complicate showings." 30 days? To leave the home I built? Where I cared for your mother until her last breath? My voice rose with each question, anger beginning to cut through the shock. "You can take personal items that were specifically yours," she conceded, as if offering a generous compromise. "Though I've already had Mother's jewelry appraised and cataloged, so that remains with the estate. What about my tools? My workshop?" Something flickered across Amanda's face, a momentary hesitation before she answered. "I've already sold the equipment from your workshop. The space will show better as a potential home gym or media room." The revelation that she had already begun dismantling my life, selling possessions that represented decades of craftsmanship, ignited something primal within me. I stood abruptly, causing Wilson to flinch backward. "How could you do this? I'm your father. I changed your diapers. I taught you to ride a bike. I helped you with science projects and drove you to dance lessons. I loved you from the moment you were born." Amanda's expression hardened, her eyes so like her mother's now cold with contempt. "You were never really part of our world, Dad. Mother kept you around because it was convenient, but we both knew you didn't belong in the life she created. You were always just the builder, never the architect." The cruelty of her words left me speechless. Wilson cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time when emotions aren't running so high." "There's nothing more to discuss," Amanda declared, gathering her designer handbag. "The legal documents are clear. I expect the house empty by month's end." I followed her into the hallway, desperate to break through whatever had hardened her heart against me. "Amanda, please. We're still family. We're all that's left of her." She turned at the elevator, her expression shifting from contempt to something worse, pity mixed with disgust. "No, we're not family. Not anymore. You were never good enough for Mother, always embarrassing her with your working-class ways and simple thoughts. She stayed out of duty, not love. "That's not true," I whispered. Those seeds of doubt had already taken root. "Go live with the pigs where you belong," she spat as the elevator doors opened. "That shabby little cabin is more your style anyway." Before I could respond, a security guard approached, summoned by Wilson with a discreet phone call. "Sir, I need to escort you from the building," he said, his tone professional but firm. In a daze, I allowed myself to be led outside to the parking lot where my truck waited. The same reliable vehicle I'd driven for 15 years, while my wife and daughter apparently lived in a world of secret wealth and duplicity I never suspected. I sat behind the wheel for nearly an hour, unable to drive, unable to even cry, feeling as if I'd awakened in someone else's nightmare. Eventually, I started the engine and drove to what had been my home for 35 years. Using my key for what would be the last time, I entered to find several storage boxes stacked in the foyer with a note from Amanda. "Your personal effects. Anything else left behind after 30 days will be discarded." 30 years of marriage reduced to 5 cardboard boxes. I took only my clothes, photo albums, and a few books before loading them into my truck. Standing in the driveway, I looked back at the house I had lovingly maintained for decades, knowing I would never step inside again. With nowhere else to go, I pointed my truck toward the mountains and the only piece of my former life I had left, a cabin that suddenly represented both my salvation and my exile. The 3-hour drive to Lake Tahoe passed in a blur of mountain curves and pine forests that I barely registered. My mind cycled through memories, searching for clues I had missed, warning signs of the betrayal that had been orchestrated over years. Had Margaret ever truly loved me, or had I been a convenient stepping stone for her ambitions? Had Amanda always viewed me with the contempt she had finally revealed, or had something poisoned her against me? The questions circled without answers, each one cutting deeper than the last. Dusk was settling when I finally turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin. I hadn't visited in nearly a year, too consumed with Margaret's care to make the trip. Even in the fading light, I could see the property had suffered from neglect. The roof sagged noticeably on one side, paint peeled from the shutters. Fallen branches cluttered the yard. A broken window had been haphazardly covered with plywood, suggesting a break-in at some point. Inside, the situation was worse. Mice had chewed through the pantry supplies and made nests in the upholstered furniture. Water damage stained one wall where gutters had failed, allowing rain to seep inside. The power was off, the pipes winterized but not properly maintained. What had once been our family retreat now stood as a painful metaphor for my life, damaged and abandoned. I unloaded my meager possessions by flashlight and collapsed onto the bare mattress in the main bedroom, still wearing my clothes from the will reading. For the first time since Margaret's diagnosis, I allowed myself to completely fall apart, sobbing until physical exhaustion finally pulled me into restless sleep. Morning brought no relief from despair. I sat on the sagging front steps, watching sunrise over the lake with empty eyes. What was the point of rebuilding at 67? My life's work had been stolen. My family had betrayed me. Even memories of happier times were now tainted, forcing me to question whether any of it had been real. The practical problems were overwhelming. Checking my personal bank account from my phone revealed a balance of just $7,000. Our joint accounts had apparently been emptied, either before Margaret's death or immediately after. My credit cards were linked to accounts now controlled by Amanda. My Social Security wouldn't begin for another 5 months when I turned 68. The cabin had no internet. The phone line was dead, and cell service was spotty at best. In that moment of complete desolation, dark thoughts crept in. What if I simply ended the pain? The lake was deep and cold. The shed contained enough rope. There were old prescriptions in the bathroom cabinet. The options presented themselves with terrifying clarity, the ultimate escape from a life that no longer seemed worth living. What stopped me was unexpected. The sudden memory of my father's voice from childhood. A stonemason who had worked with his hands until arthritis made it impossible, he had often told me, "A Thompson never quits. We bend, but don't break." The memory cut through my despair like a shaft of light, reminding me that I had faced adversity before. Not like this, but I came from resilient stock. With no better option, I began methodically assessing the cabin's condition. The structural damage was significant, but not catastrophic. The roof needed immediate attention before the next rain. The water damage had rotted some interior walls that would need replacement. The plumbing and electrical systems required professional inspection. I estimated repairs would cost at least $20,000. Money I didn't have. 3 days into my exile, I heard a vehicle approaching. Wary of Amanda sending someone to harass me further, I watched through the window as an old pickup truck parked beside my own. A weathered man in his 70s emerged, carrying a grocery bag and a toolbox. "Hello, the house," he called out in the traditional mountain greeting. "Frank Delgado, your neighbor from 2 miles down. Noticed your truck and thought I'd check if you needed anything." Frank became my unexpected lifeline. A retired park ranger, he had observed the cabin's deterioration over recent years and occasionally chased away trespassers. Over coffee brewed on a camp stove, I found myself telling him everything, the words pouring out to the first person who had shown me kindness since my world collapsed. "That's a special kind of cruelty," he commented when I finished. "Family should stand by you, not kick you when you're down." In the following days, Frank helped me restore basic utilities and brought supplies from town. More importantly, he represented a human connection when I most needed one. His matter-of-fact approach to problems provided a template for my own recovery. "Can't fix everything at once," he advised. "Pick one thing each day, do it well, and that's enough." I followed his wisdom, establishing a routine that began with one small repair each morning. I reinforced the sagging porch, patched the broken window, cleared gutters and repaired downspouts. The physical labor provided temporary respite from emotional pain, allowing exhaustion to bring sleep each night. My attempts to contact old friends proved disheartening. Most expressed awkward sympathy, but kept conversations brief. Several mentioned Amanda had contacted them with concerns about my mental health following Margaret's death, suggesting I was unstable and needed space. The realization that she had systematically isolated me deepened my sense of betrayal, but also hardened my resolve to rebuild. One rainy afternoon, seeking connection to happier times, I opened the photo albums I had salvaged. Among vacation snapshots and family portraits, I found pictures of Amanda as a young girl helping me build this very cabin. In one, she proudly held a hammer, her smile revealing missing front teeth as we framed the main room together. In another, Margaret watched from the porch as Amanda and I laid the stone path to the lake. What had happened to that joyful child? How had she become the cold woman who could discard me without remorse? The financial reality of my situation became clearer with each passing day. Medical bills from Margaret's treatment had apparently been paid from my personal accounts rather than our insurance, explaining the depleted funds. My business, now legally Amanda's, had clients who might have helped me, but I couldn't bring myself to leverage those relationships against my own daughter, despite her cruelty. 2 weeks into my exile, I reached my lowest point. A severe storm damaged the already compromised roof, sending water pouring into the main room. I worked through the night in driving rain, attempting repairs with inadequate materials, finally collapsing in exhausted defeat as water pooled on the floor. Sitting in a puddle, tools scattered around me, I seriously contemplated walking into the lake and ending my struggle. What saved me was unexpected anger, finally breaking through the grief. Why should I surrender when I had done nothing wrong? Why should Margaret and Amanda's betrayal define my remaining years? The very fact that they had gone to such lengths to deceive me suggested there might be more to the story than I understood. That realization kindled a small flame of purpose where before there had been only emptiness. The next morning, I borrowed Frank's truck and drove to the nearest hardware store. Using most of my remaining funds, I purchased proper materials to repair the roof. The store owner, hearing my situation, offered me credit for additional supplies and suggested local handyman jobs I could take for income. It wasn't much, but it represented a path forward, however humble. Working methodically over the next week, I repaired the roof and began addressing the water damage inside. Each small victory strengthened my resolve. I started taking on repair jobs for other cabin owners in the area, earning enough to buy groceries and continue improvements to my own place. Physical work gave structure to days that might otherwise have been consumed by despair. As I tore out water-damaged floorboards in what had been our family room, unexpected memories surfaced. Amanda learning to play chess by the fireplace. Margaret reading aloud on stormy evenings. The Christmas we were snowed in and had to improvise gifts from items found around the cabin. Had all of that been pretense? The question haunted me as I worked, driving me to search for answers I wasn't sure I wanted to find. 6 weeks after arriving at the cabin, I was making progress on repairs but still struggling emotionally. Though the immediate shock had faded, a deep sense of betrayal and confusion remained. Why had Margaret left me with so little after 40 years together? What had turned Amanda against me so completely? The questions haunted my days and disturbed my nights. On a Tuesday morning in August, I began replacing the rotted floorboards in the main room. The damage was extensive, requiring me to remove a large section of flooring near the stone fireplace. As I pried up the last board, my crowbar slipped through unexpectedly, revealing a space beneath that shouldn't have existed. The foundation plans I had drawn decades ago showed solid concrete in this area. Curious, I widened the opening and shone my flashlight into the cavity. There, nestled in a space roughly 2 feet square, sat a metal lockbox I had never seen before. The box was high quality with a digital combination lock, definitely not something I had installed. Heart pounding, I lifted it out and placed it on the workbench, studying it from all angles. Who had created this hidden compartment? When? The craftsmanship matched the cabin's original construction, suggesting it had been part of the initial building process. But that was impossible. I had built this place with my own hands, and I had never included a secret space, unless someone had modified it later without my knowledge. With no way to open the sophisticated lock, I eventually resorted to brute force, using a drill and then bolt cutters to break the mechanism. Inside, I found a waterproof pouch containing a USB drive, a stack of letters bound with twine, several financial documents, and a sealed envelope with my name, written in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting. Hands trembling, I opened Margaret's letter first. "Lindsay, if you are reading this, it means circumstances have forced you to the cabin, and you've discovered my contingency plan. I owe you the truth, though it comes too late for us. The wealth I accumulated over our years together did not come solely from legitimate art dealing. With my partner Thomas Blackwood, I have been creating and selling forgeries of minor works by major artists for over 25 years. What began as a single desperate act during a financial crisis became a lucrative criminal enterprise that I could not find the courage to end. Amanda joined our operation during her college years, using her business acumen to launder money through various fronts, including my official gallery. The $6 million I left her is primarily from these illegal activities. I kept you ignorant of our criminal actions to protect you from legal consequences, though I now recognize that my protection was also a profound betrayal of your trust. I left you the cabin because it contains not only this confession, but also the key to your future security. The property sits on land with significant mineral rights that I purchased separately from the original land deal. The documentation is included with this letter. These rights are worth approximately $12 million to the mining company that has been attempting to acquire them for years. I loved you, Lindsay, in my damaged way. My greatest regret is that I lacked the courage to live honestly with the wonderful man who gave me 40 years of genuine devotion. Please forgive me if you can, but if not, I understand. Margaret. The revelation staggered me. I sat on the dusty floor surrounded by fragments of my shattered reality, trying to absorb the scope of Margaret's deception. Not just financial betrayal, but criminal activity spanning decades. And Amanda, my own daughter, a willing participant. After the initial shock subsided, I examined the remaining contents of the box. The USB drive contained thousands of images, financial spreadsheets, and communications detailing the forgery operation. The letters were correspondence between Margaret and Thomas Blackwood, dating back to 1994, outlining their methods, contacts, and profits. Most disturbing were photographs showing Amanda's involvement from her early 20s, documentation of her managing sales and finances for art pieces. I now understood were sophisticated fakes. One spreadsheet detailed how she had systematically transferred my business assets into accounts controlled by Margaret, effectively stealing the company I had built from nothing. The mineral rights documents were legitimate, filed with the county but never mentioned to me. Maps showed copper and silver deposits running beneath the property, extending under the lake. Correspondence from Silver Peak Mining Corporation confirmed their interest in purchasing these rights, with the most recent offer dated just 3 months before Margaret's death. As night fell, I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey, watching moonlight on the lake and contemplating my options. The evidence gave me power I hadn't possessed since Margaret's death, but using it meant potentially sending my own daughter to prison. Despite Amanda's cruelty, could I bring myself to destroy her life completely? Yet how could I ignore crimes that had victimized innocent collectors and galleries for decades? Sleep eluded me as moral questions wrestled with hurt and anger. By morning, I had reached no clear conclusion beyond knowing I needed legal advice from someone not connected to Margaret or her affairs. Using Frank's phone, I called Sarah Daniels, an attorney I had met through a construction project years earlier, who had since opened her own practice in Sacramento. 2 days later, I sat in Sarah's office, the contents of the lockbox spread across her conference table. She reviewed everything carefully before looking up with an expression of professional concern. "Lindsay, this evidence details major crimes," she explained. "Art forgery at this scale involves mail fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, and possibly money laundering. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on most of these activities." "What are my options?" I asked. "Legally, you have several. You could turn everything over to the FBI's art crime team. You could use it as leverage to negotiate with Amanda for a more equitable division of assets. Or you could destroy it all and simply use the mineral rights to secure your future." "And morally?" I pressed, needing guidance beyond the legal implications. Sarah removed her glasses, her expression softening. "Morally, that's something only you can decide. But I will say this: allowing your wife and daughter's criminal enterprise to continue victimizing others wouldn't honor the honest man Margaret described in her letter." Her words resonated with values I had lived by for 67 years, craftsmanship and integrity that had defined my life before it unraveled. Whatever I decided, I couldn't compromise those principles, not even for family. While considering my next steps, I used Sarah's resources to investigate current activities at Margaret's gallery, now run by Amanda. What I discovered cemented my decision. Amanda was actively selling pieces from Margaret's collection, works I now knew were sophisticated forgeries. New victims were being defrauded while I deliberated. After a week of careful consideration, I contacted FBI agent Michael Turner, a specialist in art crimes. In his austere government office, I presented copies of the evidence, holding back only Margaret's personal letter to me. "Mr. Thompson, this is one of the most comprehensive documentation packages of art fraud I've ever seen," Turner commented after reviewing the materials. "But pursuing this case would mean serious consequences for your daughter. Are you prepared for that?" The question cut to the heart of my struggle. Was justice worth destroying what remained of my family? Images flashed through my mind: Margaret's gentle smile, Amanda's childhood laughter, moments I had treasured that now seemed built on lies. "I don't want revenge," I finally said. "But I can't be complicit in continued fraud. Is there any way to stop the criminal activity without maximum penalties?" Turner considered this. "If your daughter cooperates fully, returns fraudulent works still in her possession, and makes restitution, the prosecutor might consider reduced charges. But that would require her voluntary cooperation, which seems unlikely given what you've told me. We developed a strategy. Rather than immediate arrest, Turner would build his case methodically while I attempted one last conversation with Amanda. If she showed any willingness to make amends, we would offer a path with less severe consequences. If not, justice would take its full course. I contacted Amanda, swallowing my pride to suggest reconciliation. "I've been thinking about what Mom would want," I told her voicemail. "Maybe we can find common ground. I have some ideas about the business I'd like to discuss." She called back surprisingly quickly. "I'm hosting an exhibition opening next Friday. You can come by the gallery before guests arrive if you want to talk." Her tone remained cold but held a note of curiosity that gave me hope she might not be beyond reach. The week before our meeting, I rented a modest apartment in San Francisco, using funds from the mineral rights documentation, which Sarah had verified were legally mine. I bought appropriate clothes for the gallery visit, recognizing that appearance would matter in Amanda's world. Most importantly, I prepared myself emotionally for what might be my last conversation with my daughter as a free woman. The evening of the gallery opening arrived. I entered the sleek modern space, where Amanda now showcased rare acquisitions from private collections, works I now recognized as elaborate fakes based on the documentation in Margaret's files. Amanda greeted me with practiced civility, her gallery director persona firmly in place. "You look better than expected," she observed. Offering champagne, I declined. "Have you come to apologize for the scene at Wilson's office?" "I've come to understand," I replied carefully, "and to give you information that affects both our futures." For the next 30 minutes, I led her through a carefully constructed conversation, never directly accusing but asking questions that revealed my knowledge. Where had certain paintings originated? How had specific documentation been obtained? Who verified the provenance of controversial pieces? With each question, her composure fractured slightly, suspicion growing in her eyes. Finally, she pulled me into her private office. "What are you implying? What exactly do you think you know?" "I know about Thomas Blackwood," I said simply. "I know about the forgery studio in Barcelona. I know about the Swiss accounts where the money was laundered." The color drained from her face. "Mother told you? Before she died?" "No, Amanda. She left me more than just the cabin. She left me the truth." In that moment, I saw fear replace arrogance in my daughter's eyes. For the first time since Margaret's death, she looked vulnerable, human again, instead of the cold stranger who had evicted me from my home. "It doesn't matter what you think you know," she recovered quickly. "You have no proof that would stand up in court. It would be your word, against documentation going back decades." I placed a single photograph on her desk, showing her and Margaret examining a painting with Blackwood, dated and time-stamped. "This is one of thousands of images, documents, and communications I found. The FBI has copies of everything." Her composure shattered completely. "You went to the FBI, your own daughter, after everything Mother did to protect you from this?" "I haven't given them everything yet," I said, the lie necessary for what came next. "There's still a way out with minimal consequences, but it requires your complete cooperation." What followed was a 20-minute conversation recorded by the device Agent Turner had provided. Amanda, believing she could still salvage her freedom, admitted knowledge of the forgeries, detailed financial arrangements, and confirmed the inheritance came from illegal sources. Most damning, she revealed plans to sell another batch of forgeries at the evening's exhibition. "You could share in the profits," she offered desperately. "More than Mother left you. Millions. We could be partners, like you and your mother were partners in deceiving me for decades." I couldn't keep the pain from my voice. "We did it for the lifestyle, the connections, the respect," she insisted. "You never understood what it took to move in those circles. Mother did what was necessary." Necessary? Destroying other people's trust? Selling lies? That was never necessary, Amanda. That was a choice. As guests began arriving in the main gallery, I stood to leave. "Consider carefully what happens next. You can contact Agent Turner voluntarily, or wait for them to contact you. One path might lead to leniency, the other won't. Her expression hardened into something ugly, the entitled woman who had told me to live with pigs returning fully. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't destroy your own daughter." I looked at her sadly. "You already destroyed us both when you chose wealth over family, lies over truth. I'm just trying to find a way back to something honest." As I walked through the gallery toward the exit, Amanda followed, her voice rising with each step. "You pathetic old man. You think anyone will believe you over me? I'll deny everything. I'll say you're senile, vengeful." I said nothing, continuing toward the door as her control disintegrated completely. "I hope you rot in that disgusting cabin. You never belonged in our world. You were nothing but Mother's charity case, her working-class project." The arriving guests stopped in shock at her outburst, witnessing the composed gallery director transforming into someone unrecognizable. Among them, though she didn't notice, were two FBI agents who had been positioned to observe the evening's events. I stepped outside into the cool San Francisco evening, her words following me onto the sidewalk. 20 minutes later, as I sat in a coffee shop across the street, I watched FBI agents enter the gallery. Through the large windows, I could see the exhibition devolving into confusion as agents began examining artwork and speaking with stunned attendees. My heart ached watching Amanda being escorted out, not in handcuffs but clearly in custody. Yet alongside the pain ran something unexpected, a thin thread of relief. The truth, however painful, had finally broken through decades of deception. Whatever happened next would at least be built on honesty rather than lies. The weeks following Amanda's arrest unfolded in a surreal procession of legal proceedings, media coverage, and personal reckoning. The FBI's operation expanded beyond my daughter to include Thomas Blackwood and several other accomplices across 3 countries. The art forgery ring had operated for nearly 30 years, producing over 200 fake works attributed to various renowned artists and causing financial damage estimated at $40 million. I retained Sarah Daniels to represent my interests, not as part of the criminal proceedings, but to help navigate the complex aftermath. The family home and other assets were frozen pending investigation, as they had been purchased with proceeds from criminal activity. The construction business, which Amanda had controlled only briefly, was returned to my management after documentation proved the transfer had been executed under false pretenses. Agent Turner kept me informed of developments, showing unexpected compassion for my situation. In 20 years investigating art crimes, I've never seen a case where a family member exposed the operation, he told me during one of our conversations. That took tremendous courage. Courage didn't feel like the right word for what had driven my actions. Necessity, perhaps. A desperate need to find solid ground after discovering my life had been built on quicksand. The media painted me alternately as a victim and a hero, neither portrayal capturing the complicated truth of a man who had loved his family while remaining blind to their deceptions. 3 weeks after her arrest, Amanda requested to see me. Sarah advised against the meeting, concerned about potential legal implications, but I needed to face my daughter directly, to understand if anything remained of our relationship worth salvaging. The federal detention center where Amanda awaited trial was a sterile, impersonal space designed to strip away individuality. Seeing her in standard-issue clothing, without makeup or designer accessories, I was struck by how young and vulnerable she appeared. For a fleeting moment, I saw echoes of the little girl who had once ridden on my shoulders through mountain trails. We sat across from each other at a small table, security cameras monitoring our interaction. Neither of us spoke immediately, the weight of broken trust and consequences hanging heavy between us. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I could ask you the same question," I replied. "You know why. For the money, the lifestyle, the connections. I meant, why did you treat me with such cruelty? The inheritance was one thing, but telling me to live with the pigs, selling my tools, those were choices beyond business, Amanda. Those were meant to hurt." She looked down, fingers fidgeting on the table surface. "Mother said we needed complete separation. that you might notice discrepancies if you remained close to our finances. The cruelty was. She hesitated, strategic. The calculated nature of their betrayal still had the power to wound me. And before that? Was our entire family life strategic too? No, she said quickly, meeting my eyes for the first time. Not at first. We were just a normal family, until I was in high school. That's when Mother introduced me to the business, showed me what was really funding our lifestyle. And you never questioned it? Never considered the victims or the law? By the time I understood fully, I was already complicit. College tuition, my apartment, my career, everything came from that money. She leaned forward. But you have to believe me. We never intended for you to end up destitute. The cabin was supposed to be valuable because of the mineral rights. Margaret's letter mentioned that. She said she left documentation in the hidden compartment. Amanda's expression shifted to confusion. What hidden compartment? The mineral rights paperwork was supposed to be with the will. Mother arranged everything with Wilson. The realization hit us simultaneously. James Wilson, Margaret's attorney, had removed the mineral rights documents from the official will, presumably to benefit himself, or perhaps in collusion with Amanda. It was only by accident, through discovering Margaret's secret backup plan, that I had learned of my true inheritance. Wilson betrayed both of us, I said slowly. He removed the mineral rights documents from the will. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse cross Amanda's features. I didn't know, Dad. I swear I didn't know he did that. Mother told me you would be financially secure through the mineral rights. That's why I didn't question the division of assets. I wasn't sure whether to believe her, but the possibility that at least some of the cruelty had stemmed from misunderstanding rather than malice offered a small measure of comfort. The FBI has offered me a deal, she continued after a moment. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. 5 years instead of 25. They want information on every forged piece, every transaction. Are you going to take it? I don't have a choice, do I? Everything's falling apart. The gallery's closed. The accounts are frozen. Thomas was arrested in Barcelona. She looked at me with desperate eyes. Will you help me? Use your influence with the prosecutors? The request caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, she still expected me to rescue her. Part of me wanted to walk away, to tell her to face the consequences of her actions without my intervention. But another part remembered holding her as an infant, teaching her to ride a bike, helping her with homework. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. I'll speak to Agent Turner, I said finally. But not to excuse what you did, only to make sure the punishment fits the crime. You need to make this right, Amanda. Full confession, full restitution to the victims. She nodded, tears forming. I never thought it would end this way. Neither did I replied, rising to signal the end of our meeting. At the door, I turned back. For what it's worth, I hope you find a way to rebuild your life honestly after this. I'm trying to do the same. In the following months, I worked with Agent Turner and the prosecution team to provide context for the case. I advocated not for leniency based on family ties, but for a focus on restitution rather than punishment alone. Amanda provided comprehensive information about every forged artwork, enabling the FBI to alert museums, galleries, and private collectors worldwide. James Wilson faced his own legal troubles when investigation revealed he had indeed deliberately concealed the mineral rights documents, intending to approach me later with an offer to discover them for a substantial fee. His law license was suspended pending criminal proceedings for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. The legal process ground forward with excruciating slowness. Amanda eventually accepted a plea agreement requiring 5 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets derived from criminal activity, and cooperation in recovering forged artworks. Thomas Blackwood received a 12-year sentence for his role as the primary forger and operational mastermind. Throughout this period, I continued dividing my time between the cabin and a small apartment in San Francisco. With the mineral rights properly documented and my ownership confirmed, I negotiated a fair agreement with Silver Peak Mining that provided financial security without requiring me to sell the property outright. The irony wasn't lost on me that Margaret's contingency plan had ultimately worked, though not in the way she had intended. Using some of these funds, I hired a contractor to properly renovate the cabin, preserving its character while making it comfortable for year-round living. Frank remained a steadfast friend, helping oversee the work and introducing me to the mountain community I now considered home. I also reclaimed my construction business, though I placed day-to-day operations in the hands of my longtime foreman while serving as consultant. After decades building homes for others, I found satisfaction in mentoring younger craftsmen, passing along not just technical skills, but the values of integrity and quality that had guided my career. 6 months after Amanda began serving her sentence, I established a small woodworking studio behind the cabin. 3 days a week, I taught basic carpentry to teenagers from the surrounding communities, focusing particularly on those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Creating something tangible with their hands gave these young people a sense of accomplishment many had never experienced before. On Amanda's request, I visited her in prison quarterly. Our conversations remained awkward, weighted by the past, but gradually evolved from recriminations to cautious rebuilding. She enrolled in education programs and worked in the prison library, perhaps seeking to construct an identity separate from the wealth and status that had driven her previous life. "I've been thinking about what I'll do after release," she told me, during one visit in her 3rd year of incarceration. "I was wondering if you might teach me woodworking, like you're teaching those kids." Something honest, something real. The request, tentative and vulnerable, suggested a possibility I had almost abandoned, that my daughter might find her way back to the values I had tried to instill before greed and deception took root. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a path toward it. "The workshop will be there when you're ready," I told her. "Some things can be rebuilt, even after they've been broken." As we walked toward that uncertain future, I carried both the pain of betrayal and the cautious hope of redemption, understanding finally that neither Margaret nor Amanda had possessed the power to define my worth. That had always been, and would always be, determined by the integrity of my own actions and the strength I found to begin again, even when everything familiar had been stripped away. 5 years passed, with the changing seasons marking time in the mountains. The aspens turned gold, then bare, then green again, mirroring my own cycles of grief, acceptance, and cautious renewal. The cabin, once a symbol of my exile, transformed into a true home reflecting the person I had always been beneath the roles of husband, father, and provider. The legal aftermath of the forgery scheme continued for years. Victims filed civil suits, insurance companies sought recoveries, and art authentication processes faced scrutiny worldwide. I remained on the periphery of these proceedings, providing information when required, but increasingly focused on rebuilding my own life, rather than dwelling on past deceptions. When Amanda completed her prison sentence in early 2025, I offered her temporary residence in the guest room of my cabin. The decision raised eyebrows among friends who had witnessed the damage she had caused, but it felt necessary for both our healing processes. She arrived with a single suitcase, her designer clothes, and aristocratic demeanor replaced by simple attire and a humility born of consequence. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, taking in the renovated cabin with its expanded workshop and the community gathering space I had added. "You've created something real here." Those first weeks together held tension and uncertainty. We navigated around each other carefully, finding safe topics in daily tasks and avoiding the deeper wounds still tender beneath surface civility. I taught her basic woodworking as promised, beginning with simple cutting boards and gradually progressing to more complex projects. Working with her hands seemed to ground Amanda in ways her previous life never had, providing immediate feedback that couldn't be manipulated or falsified. "I never understood what you did," she admitted one evening as we sat on the porch watching sunset paint the lake copper and gold. "I thought building things was just manual labor, beneath the art world Mother introduced me to. Now I see there's more integrity in a well-made chair than in all the forgeries we sold." Moments of honesty like these gradually built bridges across the chasm of betrayal, not erasing the past, but creating the possibility of a different future. 3 months after her release, Amanda found work at a local community center teaching art classes to children. The irony of using her extensive art knowledge for legitimate education rather than deception wasn't lost on either of us. Throughout this period, I maintained regular contact with those affected by the forgery scheme. Agent Turner connected me with several major victims, allowing me to apologize personally for my family's actions, even though I had been unaware of them. These conversations were difficult but necessary, part of my commitment to facing truth rather than hiding from it, as Margaret had done for decades. The mineral rights agreement provided financial stability without excessive wealth. I established a foundation supporting arts education that emphasized ethics alongside technique, hoping to foster a generation of creators who understood the value of authentic expression. This work became increasingly meaningful, transforming pain into purpose by addressing the very issues that had corrupted my family. Amanda eventually moved into her own apartment in the nearby town, finding a balance between independence and maintaining our fragile new relationship. She volunteered with victim restitution efforts, using her insider knowledge to help identify forged works still circulating in the art market. While some victims refused to work with her, others appreciated her expertise and evident remorse. "Do you think Mother ever regretted what she did?" Amanda asked during a Sunday dinner at the cabin, nearly 2 years after her release. Not just getting caught, but the deception itself? I considered the question carefully, thinking of Margaret's letter and the woman I had loved for 40 years. I believe she regretted the distance it created between who she was and who she presented herself to be. Living a double life extracts a cost beyond the legal consequences. "I feel that," Amanda nodded. "Even now, sometimes I catch myself calculating how to present things to my advantage, how to manipulate perceptions. Old habits from a lifetime of deception. The difference is, now you recognize it," I pointed out. "That awareness is the beginning of change." As I approached my 70s, I found unexpected peace in my simplified life. The betrayal that once seemed unbearable gradually transformed into a painful but valuable lesson about the nature of wealth, relationships, and authenticity. Money had not brought happiness to Margaret or Amanda, instead pushing them toward criminal activity and emotional isolation. My forced return to basics had ultimately connected me with genuine community and purpose. Frank remained a steadfast friend, though declining health eventually required him to move into assisted living in town. I visited him weekly, our roles reversed as I now brought supplies and checked on his well-being. "You turned out all right, Thompson," he told me during one visit. "Most men would have broken completely after what happened to you." "I bent, but didn't break," I replied, echoing my father's words that had sustained me in my darkest moments. The construction business continued under my foreman's capable management, with my role evolving into occasional consultant and mentor to younger builders. The company established a scholarship program for trade school students, emphasizing not just technical skills, but the ethical foundations of craftsmanship. "Build as if your name will be on it forever," became our unofficial motto. My relationship with Amanda remained complicated, a complex tapestry of love, hurt, forgiveness, and caution. We would never return to the innocent father-daughter relationship of her childhood, but we constructed something new from the ruins, something anchored in truth rather than illusion. She never fully explained her participation in Margaret's scheme or her cruelty after the will reading, perhaps because complete understanding remained elusive even to her. On the 5th anniversary of my discovery of the lockbox that changed everything, I hosted a gathering at the cabin for the community of friends who had helped rebuild my life. Amanda attended, now accepted by most, though some still maintained polite distance. As sunset painted the mountains in shades of amber and purple, I found myself reflecting on the journey from devastation to rebuilding. The wealth that Margaret and Amanda had valued so highly had brought them neither happiness nor security. The status they pursued through deception had proven ephemeral, collapsing completely when truth emerged. In contrast, the skills, Relationships and integrity I had sometimes thought mundane had sustained me when everything else was stripped away. True wealth, I now understood, lay not in bank accounts or possessions, but in the ability to face oneself honestly in the mirror each morning. Margaret had denied herself that essential human dignity through decades of deception. Amanda was only beginning to discover it through the painful process of making amends. I had found it again by choosing truth over bitterness, creation over destruction. As darkness fell and guests departed, Amanda lingered to help clean up. In the kitchen, she paused beside me, hesitation in her expression before speaking. "Thank you," she said simply, "for not giving up on me completely. You had every right to." "Family is complicated," I replied, the understatement drawing unexpected laughter from both of us. "We hurt each other in ways strangers never could. But we can also heal each other, if we choose to." That night, sitting alone on the porch of a cabin that had witnessed both my deepest despair and gradual rebirth, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this moment of unexpected peace. The betrayal that once seemed unendurable had ultimately revealed strengths I never knew I possessed and values more precious than any inheritance. The night sky opened above the mountains, stars emerging like possibilities in darkness. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it with the hard-won knowledge that true wealth comes not from what we possess, but from what possesses our hearts. Not from facades we present to the world, but from the courage to live authentically even when that path leads through pain. Not from what others bestow upon us, but from what we build with our own hands and integrity. Have you ever experienced betrayal that ultimately led to unexpected growth or wisdom? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes our most painful experiences contain the seeds of our most important lessons. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and renewal. And remember, no matter how complete the devastation may seem, it's never too late to build something beautiful from the ruins. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may you find strength in your struggles and peace in your accomplishments, however modest they may seem.